Here we have a Hankscraft Model 202A Vaporizer type humidifier. I'm not exactly sure when this would be made. I would think sometime in the 50s. And this is once again another example of a vintage appliance that is extremely simple, much more simple than stuff today made, with an exception of one thing. It's safer than the new version, and of course it's going to last longer and work better because it's simpler. Just sort of like these old space heaters that for some reason everyone thinks is dangerous. Now, this is an electrode boiler, basically. And the way this works, unlike the modern ones, a lot of the modern ones, you can see the water going out of that there. It's got this small hole here. It's got this tube. And this tube inside of here, the power cord comes in here and attaches directly to, and I will tear this down later on in the video to demonstrate. It connects to two metal rods inside of this Bakelite tube here, and it's a very good design because there's no heating element in here. There's no electronics at all. The power cord literally comes in and goes to two metal rods that are down into here. They're electrodes. And this little tube here fills up with water, as you saw, and it's got this in case it boils over. So when it's put in here, that fills up with water, and the two electrodes are connected directly to 120 volts, and they will pass current through the water, which of course is resistive, so it will heat up. It will then boil the water, which is inside of that tube, and come out of here. It heats up actually quite quickly because it's only having to heat up what's inside of there, not this whole jar at once. Although the jar does get quite warm when it gets about to halfway down. And it just puts out steam here. It's very simple. And once again, it's safer than a modern one, because a modern one, most of them, there are a few that are still electrode boiler types, but then again, they're all plastic. It has no electronics, it has no float switches or anything. It just uses the water as the heating element. So therefore, when the water runs down, there's nothing left to complete the circuit. So it is not going to continue running, it's not going to overheat or in any way. A lot of modern ones have a little heating element in them, and they have a float switch or a temperature switch, either way, that will either notice that it's running hotter than it would be because it ran out of water, or the float switch, of course, would tell the thing that there's no water left and it would cut off the heating element. So if either one of those two devices were to fail, and of course they're made cheaply and they're modern and whatnot, so they do fail, the element can overheat and it can cause the plastic that they're all made out of now to start melting. This one, even if it were to catch on fire, which is basically impossible, but if it were to overheat somehow, this is Bakelite, it's not plastic, so it won't melt, it'll just sort of smoke a lot. But let's say something, once again, we had another freak accident and this whole thing were to catch on fire. Unless you have something like right above it, it's just going to drop down in this glass jar, and this is metal. There's no hazard here. And the new ones have thin plastic cords that can also melt. This cord here is made out of asbestos. Now, the outer weaving is not. This is actually cotton or something, so you don't have to worry about touching it or, you know, and getting fibers all over, because it's inside, it's underneath all of this. But since this cord is asbestos, you could literally hold it up to a blowtorch and it wouldn't melt, it wouldn't burn, nothing would happen to it, it would be fine. So there's nothing to fail here. The only thing that maintenance that this thing does require is every now and then to clean the electrodes inside of there. And they say you can run some vinegar through them. I've never done it that way. I normally just pull it out, take it apart, and scrape off the electrodes. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug this in. Now, I will say that this does need to be cleaned, but it's not as bad as it looks. That is salt, because sometimes if you fill it up too much, you can see the fill line's right about here, because it has these little holes here that are meant for, when it's really full, sometimes it'll boil over a bit, and it's meant to drip back out of here, but if you overfill it, it will block those holes. You can see now they're not blocked, so it won't do it, but if you overfill it, it'll block those holes. And it actually will start boiling out through here. I mean, it won't like be pouring water, but you know, you'll get a few spritzes of water coming out of here. And that's what that is. I need to clean it, but it's not like gross or anything. That's just salt. Because we have 2 water filters, one under the house and one in the damn sink, so we have very pure water. And if you don't have hard water, this thing doesn't work so great, because it needs those minerals in the water to boil it. So if you have very pure water, it's going to either not do well or it's going to take a long time. So I always have to add like 2 pinches of salt to this and mix it in, and then it works very well. Other than that, there's not much to say about this. You can put some Vapo Rub or whatever, not Vapo Rub, but the type of whatever the hell you would put in here. I don't know, I don't use that. Anyway, we saw that it was rated for 5.5 amps. But this thing, it says 5.5 amps max. So that would lead you to believe that it's not going to pull more than 5.5 amps. However, this thing can draw insane amounts of current when you first turn it on. So we'll plug in our kilowatt here. And you can see we're running at 124 volts. 0 hertz? That ain't right. 60 hertz. There we go. 0 hertz. So I got it on amps. We'll see how much it's drawing. I would like to mention that I do have this plugged into its own separate circuit. Over here, that's my air conditioner circuit. But I use it for the heater, and this is a 20 amp circuit in the winter time when the air conditioner is not in place. Because the circuit that all these lights, all this computer, and all this is on is the same circuit that the other 2 bedrooms are on, and it does trip a lot. There's no way you're running a 12 amp space heater on there, or this thing. Well, I've never had this thing trip the breaker, but it does dim the lights. So we'll go ahead and plug it in, and this thing maxes out. But you can see for a second how much it's drawing. This thing maxes out at 10 amps. If it goes over 10 amps, it just says OL for overload. So we'll plug it in, and you can see it starts off real low. But it's going up. And it does spike and stay spiked until it starts warming up. And then it goes back down to about 3.5 amps. You can hear it starting to make noise. .17. So it's now at pulling twice what it's rated for. You can see it cuts it out. But you can see we're already starting to get a little bit of steam. Now I'm going to unplug it and then plug it back in, because this thing will display how much current it's drawing for a few minutes, for a few seconds. You can see we're now drawing 11.25 amps. That's probably about where it's going to max out at. I don't want to fry my meter here, so I'm not going to leave it plugged into that. But you can see we're starting to get a little bit of steam coming out now. It does take a little bit to warm up. I'd say it takes it maybe 10 minutes to get fully warmed up and spewing steam out like it normally does. So I'm going to cut the video and I'll come back there. And once it does warm up, I'll also demonstrate the current draw that this thing pulls. One thing to also notice, look at the water. See how it's already started turning it a bit yellow? I find it interesting how it does that. You can see it sort of, see how it's sort of boiling over there a little bit? See how the water's coming out of those holes there? If the water was too high, it would come out here, and that's what that salt is from. But yeah, I mean, you can see it's warmed up. I don't know if you can see it or not, but we do have steam coming out of it, but I will be back once it gets fully going. Here goes the camera again. Hold on. Damn it. Okay, there we go. So it's still not completely warmed up. It's been about 10 minutes. It's almost warmed up. The jar is still cold except for at the top where it's getting a bit warm. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. Yeah, you can kind of see it. It's a lot more clear on person. Let me turn this fan off. I just got this. It's a little wind mirror type fan. It's going to need some oil. It's hardly running properly right now. Anyway, you can kind of hear it. Where's the microphone? There it is. You can hear it boiling. You can hear the steam coming out of it. And you can certainly see that it steamed up the camera. And it does a good job. I mean, it evaporates this pretty quickly. This will take maybe an hour before it's run down. So it does a good job. You can see a little bit... Damn it. You can see a little bit of water running down there. I mean, it's steam. It's obviously going to condensate. This is colder than the water, so once again, that's why that salt's there. So I don't want any comments on how disgusting it is. That's just salt. But I will clean it off for too much longer. But God, how many times am I going to do that? We'll go ahead and measure the current from it now. It should be stabilized right around 4 or 5 amps is normally where it seems to sit at. See, so 125 volts. It does drop the voltage a bit to 122. But if we look at amps, 4.16, 7.76. It jumps around a lot, but once it gets nice and warmed up, it generally sits about 5 or 6 amps. Sometimes around 4. It depends on how much salt you put in it. I did put quite a bit in this time, so this might be where it sits at today, although it is dropping a little bit. I did put quite a bit of salt in it because I wanted it to heat up quickly for the video. The other interesting thing is that how quickly it stops. I'm going to unplug it now. You can see it quit. On. You can hear it. Off. On. So, on, off, you can see it stops instantly, and when I plug it back in, it starts back up instantly. So it does keep that water right on the edge of boiling or not. Another thing, I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but you can see how it turns the water yellow. I don't know why it does that. It does that almost instantly. If it was like only when it got to the bottom half, I'd think, okay, it's you know, that was just the minerals or whatever in the water, and since it's boiling off, obviously they're not going to boil off, so it's just stronger in the bottom part. But when you plug it in, the second it starts boiling, you can see it start dumping. Well, you can't now, but it starts turning the water yellow instantly, and it has nothing to do with the machine not being clean. That's nothing coming out of the machine. You'll see when I tear it down later, it's just 2 electrodes that stick into the water. And while they might not be the cleanest right now, I haven't cleaned it in a little while, they're pretty clean. It's not like all that crap is coming off of this machine in any way. And of course it's old enough to where all the outgassing and everything that might have been happening when it was new is stopped. So I really don't know exactly why it turns the water yellow. But when it gets to the bottom part, it'll be so yellow you can hardly see through it. Right now it's just kind of cloudy. And I have, just for the hell of it, puts like a glass up to the steam, and the steam coming out of it's perfectly clear. Of course it is, because water, if you boil water, the steam coming off of it is going to be pure, clean. So It's not putting whatever the yellow stuff in here, it's not putting it in the air, so I don't know what the deal with that is. I don't know if a new one of these would do that or not. I don't think one of the ones with the heating element inside of it would do that. I know that the cheap ones you can buy, like the Vicks branded ones, are the same type electrode boiler. Obviously they're still more dangerous than this because they're plastic, and I think they have all sorts of different electronic stuff in there. But it's the same basic design, and although you can't really see through the tank on those, I haven't had one of those, so I don't know if it makes the water yellow like this or not. That might be normal for this. I mean, I know it's normal for this thing. It's done it since I've got it. I would like to get another one of these, but they actually fetch quite a bit of money for some reason. I mean, you can look on eBay, they're selling for around $40, $50, which might not seem like much, but to me it does when it's just a power cord going into a piece of plastic that sticks in a jar of water. And interestingly enough, you can buy this exact same jar, exact same markings and everything at Walmart for like, I think it's $10. So if you do somehow break your glass jar, you can still buy the exact same one. And you can see, I'll pull this up and it's gonna, yeah, see the steam coming out of there. See the threads on there? So I don't think this is any sort of, this is not a specific jar for this machine. I mean, this is obviously the original jar. You can see it fits into this tray, but the company probably just sourced a random jar and then made their machine around the jar. It was probably just the cheapest thing they could find at the time. So, yeah. If the jar breaks, which is about the only thing on this machine that I could think would possibly happen, you can buy this exact same one still. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you very much for watching. I guess it's not over yet. I'm still going to take it apart and show you how it works. And I know I'm going to do that because I actually recorded it before I even started this section. But I'm going to put it at the end. Anyway, yeah. Okay, so here's the top of the Hankscraft, the actual electrical bit. And as you can see, I do need to clean it. It's got some stuff in here. It looks worse than it is. That's basically just salt. Because when you first fill it up, sometimes it'll bubble out of there, and that's just salt. So you can just clean that with some water. Here's a better look at the information tag. I think I showed it pretty good. Hankscraft 202A. There's the instructions. You can see it's rated for 5.5 amp and less, but as you saw when we demonstrated it, that it actually does draw more than that sometimes. So I've got it taken apart. There's just 3 screws that hold this bit on, and we'll pull it off. You see there's nothing down in there, it's just plastic. And of course there's a little tiny hole in here, so when you put it down into water, this little section fills up with water. And then if it does boil over, it comes out these holes here and goes back into the container of liquid. It's water. And as you can see here, like I already stated, there's really nothing to this. There's no heating elements or anything. The power cord literally comes in and goes into here. I'm not going to take this top plate off, but it just connects to 2 terminals, and this is the other side of the terminals, and it goes to these 2 metal rods. And these 2 metal rods, when you plug it in, full 120 volts just goes right across these 2 metal rods, and if I were touching it now I would be getting shocked very badly if it were plugged in. There's no sort of switch, there's no sort of anything. It's literally just a power cord that comes in and connects to these 2 metal rods, and these 2 metal rods put current through the water and heat it up. And since this is such a small area, you can see the little small opening in the very bottom there that the water comes in, and then it goes out these. It only has to heat up what is in this tube at the time, so it doesn't have to heat up that whole jar at once, although eventually the whole thing does get warm close to the bottom. So it's only heating up what's in here. And then of course, since the water is what's completing the circuit, there is no sort of heating element or anything. Once once the water runs out, there's nothing to complete the circuit, so it's automatically off. Now, I'm going to go ahead. I've never actually tried this before. Obviously, it's not going to start heating up because it would take forever. But I'm going to plug this in and just see if we can see what any sort of thing going on in there. And see, when it's like this, the piece of plastic, I think, pushes the electrodes together. So we're really not getting any action off of this. So not too surprised there. But yeah. And like I said, the only really maintenance you have to do to this thing is clean these rods. And they say you can just put some vinegar in there and let it boil or whatever. But I don't know if that would be enough. I have been using I've just been scraping as much of it as I can off. And it's just like minerals that come out of the water. And I don't know what these two metal rods are made of. You can see underneath there. They're not rusted or anything. They've just got a lot of scale on them, so I don't know if they're stainless steel or what they are, but they don't seem to be breaking down in any way. And of course, it just heats up the water in here, and it goes out through this hole right there, you can see. And that's where the steam comes from. So it's a very, very simple design that is extremely reliable and works very well.